So with the Las Vegas Summer League officially here, I wanted to talk about some of the players that I am most excited to watch. And some of the players on this list are top picks from this year's draft, but then I have others that are second-year players or former first-round picks that are still trying to prove that they belong. So in today's video, I'm breaking down one player to watch on every single NBA Summer League team. So let's jump into it. And starting us off, we have the Atlanta Hawks, and I'm going with Zuby Ejiofor. I know they have a top pick in Kingston Flemings, but Ejiofor already looks like one of the most productive bigs that we have in Summer League. He opened with 8 points, 11 rebounds, and 3 steals in Salt Lake City, then followed that up with 19 points, 15 rebounds, 3 assists, and a block against Oklahoma City. And through 2 games, he's averaging 13.5 points and 13 rebounds, and he's the only player in the Salt Lake City Summer League that averaged double-digit boards. And I think that's going to matter for Atlanta because he fits perfectly next to Jalen Johnson as a high-motor frontcourt piece. And the most underrated part of his game, I think, is his defense, and I think Ejiofor is going to give Atlanta real two-way upside. Up next, we have the Boston Celtics, and for them, I'm going with Hugo Gonzalez. The box score numbers from his rookie year were definitely modest at just 4 points and 3.5 rebounds per game, but the impact was much louder than that if you actually watched him. Gonzalez posted a plus 11.9 net rating across 74 games, which is the best mark of any rookie who played at least 100 minutes, and that just goes to show his energy, his high-level defense, and that he had the ability to fit into winning lineups. And now with Boston reshaping their roster after the Jaylen Brown trade, I think Summer League is his chance to show what else that he can do, and the question is going to be whether he can handle a bigger offensive role and become a real rotation wing for the new look Celtics this season. And next, for the Brooklyn Nets, I'm going with Mikel Brown Jr. They also have Yegor Dimon, who I'm interested to look at, but I'm still going with Brown. Brooklyn ranked 30th on offense last season, so Brown steps into a situation where his scoring and on-ball creativity immediately matter for them. Now, he only played 1 game at the California Classic, but in his 19 minutes, he finished with 10 points and 4 assists, and you could already see the flashes of potential from him. He showed that he can score at all 3 levels, he plays with pace, and can create passing windows off the dribble. And the sample with Brown so far is small because of the back injury that limited him in college, but I think that's what makes Las Vegas so important. And in this Summer League, I think Brooklyn needs to see not only how Brown performs, but also how Yegor Dimon fit as future building blocks for their franchise. Next, we have the Charlotte Hornets, and I'm going with Christian Anderson Jr. I think Charlotte had a real momentum after winning the 2025 Las Vegas Summer League Championship, especially with Con Knippel and Ryan Kalkbrenner turning that into strong rookie seasons. Now, Anderson gets his first chance to create that same kind of early buzz with the Hornets. He was taken 18th overall in this past NBA draft, and with LaMelo Ball now in Minnesota, I think the path to a bigger role is more realistic than I originally expected. Anderson was valued because of his shooting and playmaking, but the Summer League is really his time to show that, and I have questions on whether he can organize the offense, can he actually lead from that point guard spot, and if he looks comfortable in Las Vegas, I think he could push for some real minutes early on with the Charlotte Hornets. And for the Chicago Bulls, I'm going with Caleb Wilson. Now, Wilson still hasn't played yet this summer, but once he does, this might be one of the most important debuts that we have. Wilson's freshman season at North Carolina ended with a fractured left hand and then a broken right thumb, but the flashes from him with his time with the Tar Heels were massive. Just days before the first injury, he dropped 23 points against Duke, and at 6'10", he gives Chicago a forward who can run the floor, finish lobs, block shots, and guard in space. And that fits what the Bulls want in their up-tempo type of system. And if Wilson looks healthy, I think he's going to immediately change the way the Bulls fans view this rebuild. Next, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers, and for them, I'm going with Malik Thomas. Cleveland didn't have a first-round pick in this year's draft, but landing Thomas early in the second round could become sneaky value for them. At Arkansas, he averaged 15.5 points and shot 41.5% from 3, which is exactly the kind of shooting Cleveland may need around its veteran core. The interesting part to me is his role. Last season, he played mostly off the ball because Darius Acuff Jr. handled so much of the offense, so in Summer League, I want to see if Cleveland lets him run more actions or if they use him as a movement shooter and floor spacer, but either way, his scoring punch gives the Cavs a young guard worth watching. And then for the Dallas Mavericks, I'm going with Morez Johnson Jr. Dallas clearly believes in what he brings as they took him 9th in this year's draft, and the Dusty May connection makes this fit even more interesting. Johnson was the first of 3 Michigan players taken in the lottery, and now he eventually reunites with the coach who helped turn him into a national champion with the Wolverines. And the value that he brings is simple, as he has an elite motor, physicality, good rebounding and finishing, and switchable defense. And with Cooper Flagg not expected to play in the Summer League, I think Johnson should get real space to show what he can do on both ends of the floor, and I'm really interested to see his jumper, because if that deeper NBA 3 starts coming along for him, I think his role at the next level could open up fast. Now we have the Denver Nuggets, and for them, I'm going with Trevon Brazile. Denver's Summer League roster tells you exactly what they're looking for. This isn't a group built around teenage projects. It's built around older players who might actually help Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, and Aaron Gordon sooner rather than later. Brazile fits that idea perfectly to me. He's 23, he spent 5 seasons in college, and at Arkansas last year, he averaged 13 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks as a starter for them. And at 6'9", he would give Denver a potential backup forward who can rebound, protect the rim, and maybe even stretch the floor. And I think the biggest question around him is whether he looks ready for real NBA minutes, and we're going to see that in Summer League. But next is the Detroit Pistons. For the Pistons, I'm going with Ebuka Okorie, but there's also Chaz Lanier who I'm interested in. But I think Detroit, they need more backup creation, and even after adding Isaiah Joe and John Collins, Okorie still feels like a major piece of the offensive answer for them. He was the 17th pick in this year's draft, but the production says he can be more than a mid-first round guard to me. At Stanford, he averaged 23 points and 3.5 assists while leading the ACC in scoring, and the downhill style that he has should pop in Summer League because Detroit can let him attack without overthinking it. Cade Cunningham carried too much of the offense last season for the Pistons, and if Okorie can create pressure, score, and make the simple reads, I think Detroit could use him a lot this season, and it could make them that much harder to guard. And now we have Golden State, and of course, I'm going with Yaxel Lendeborg, but there's also Will Richard, who's another second-year guard that I'm interested in. But as you could tell, Golden State didn't draft Yaxel Lendeborg to wait 3 years for him to be ready. They drafted him because he already knows how to impact winning. Lendeborg was an All-American, won a national championship at Michigan, and enters Summer League as one of the oldest first-round picks, but that's going to matter. He's strong, versatile, and comfortable doing a little bit of everything. And for a roster built around Stephen Curry and Draymond Green, who are both in the latter half of their careers, that kind of plug-and-play forward just makes sense to me. And I don't think the question is whether or not he can produce in the Summer League. It's whether his scoring, defense, and overall feel for the game translate quickly enough to earn real minutes with the Dubs. And next we have the Houston Rockets, and for the Rockets, I'm going with Bruce Thornton as my player to watch. Houston added veterans like Marcus Smart and Bogdan Bogdanovic in the offseason, but they still need more ball handling and decision-making behind Fred VanVleet. And although I wasn't the highest on Thornton, that's going to create a real opportunity for him this season. He left Ohio State's program as the all-time leading scorer, but the number that stands out for me is the 3.0 assist-to-turnover ratio he posted as a senior, and that tells you that he can run an offense without getting reckless. Now, he may be undersized, but Summer League is the perfect setting to prove he can organize possessions, create paint touches, and just make the right reads. And since he was Houston's only draft addition, I think his development matters even more. And next, we got the Indiana Pacers, and with the Pacers, I'm going with Braden Smith. Smith is the kind of player Summer League fans can fall in love with fast. Now, he's 5'10" and just 167 pounds, so there are definitely size questions, but the resume he brings is absolutely ridiculous. At Purdue, he finished with over 1,100 assists and became the NCAA's all-time assist leaders. He's also an Indiana native, which makes the Pacers fit feel natural. Now, next season, Tyrese Halliburton will be back, Andrew Nembhard's also going to be there and he can handle, and TJ McConnell is still reliable, so minutes won't be easy to come by. But to me, Smith feels like a long-term TJ McConnell type successor, as he's smart, tough, and knows how to run an offense without needing the spotlight, and I'm very excited to see what he can do in Summer League. Then we got the Los Angeles Clippers, and I'm going with Keaton Wagler. With Kawhi Leonard now gone and the Clippers finally shifting to a younger timeline, Wagler lands in a much better developmental situation than expected. He was the 5th overall pick after averaging 18 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists at Illinois with 45, 40, and 80 shooting splits. And right now, he may not be an elite athlete, but the size, the shooting touch, the passing, and his feel gives him a real chance to contribute early, and the biggest question for me in Vegas is how he handles athletic NBA guards, and I'm also interested to see if they're going to play him more on or off ball. And up next, we got the Los Angeles Lakers, and if you watched any of the Summer League ball before Las Vegas, you know I have to go with Cameron Carr. He was one of the best rookies that we had at the California Classic, and the skill set he brings looks very real. Carr averaged 17 points per game while shooting 41% from three, but it wasn't just standstill shooting. He hit movement threes, created jumpers off the dribble, and got to the rim with regularity, and that matters because the Lakers need young role players who can fit around Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves without needing the ball all the time. And Carr has the outline of a 3-and-D wing at the next level, but I think these self-creation flashes we saw raise his ceiling even more. And if he keeps scoring efficiently in Vegas, I think he's going to become a real rotation player for the Lakers this season. And next, we got the Memphis Grizzlies, and this might be one of the most loaded teams we have in Summer League, but I have to go with Cameron Boozer. Boozer hasn't been as great as Darryn Peterson, but his production overall has still been incredible in the Summer League. Through 2 games in Salt Lake City, he averaged 16.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 4 assists while shooting 65% from the field and 62.5% from 3. And the most impressive part is that Memphis hasn't played through him every possession. They also have Cedric Howard and Javon Small, who have handled a lot of the on-ball work, yet Boozer still impacts the game with his feel, his touch, and decision-making, and after winning National Player of the Year this past season at Duke, he already looks like he's ready to help the Memphis Grizzlies immediately. And for the Miami Heat, I'm going with Ryan Conwell. Miami needed shooting after the Giannis Antetokounmpo trade, and Conwell is exactly the kind of specialist who could stick. He shot 37.5% from 3 across 4 college stops, and as a senior, he launched 17.5 threes per 100 possessions, and I think that kind of volume and efficiency matters next to Giannis, whose average shot distance last season was only 6 feet. And at the California Classic, we saw Conwell as Miami's clear standout as he averaged 21 points, 5 rebounds, and 3.5 assists for the Heat. And he's not just a shooter standing in the corner. We also saw him get to the rim and make plays for others, and if he can defend enough, his spacing and confidence give him a real chance to crack the rotation with Miami. Next, we have the Milwaukee Bucks, and I'm going with Nate Ament, although I could have gone with Braden Burries, who was actually drafted higher. But after moving Giannis, Milwaukee needs upside swings, and Ament is one of the biggest ones on this roster. At Tennessee, Ament averaged 16.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, while playing through an ankle issue, so the talent and toughness are both there from him. But the concern for me is how quickly he's able to adjust to the physicality of the NBA. His final college game was against Michigan, who was one of the most physical teams we had in all of college basketball this past season, and he ended with just a 7.2 for 12 outing, which exposed how tough it can be for him against older and bigger front courts, and I think that's why Summer League matters so much for him. If Ament plays, Milwaukee needs to see his shot making, his rebounding, and stronger finishing through contact, but if he's able to do that, I think he's going to get a ton of minutes with Milwaukee this upcoming season. Next, it's the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I'm going with Joan Beringer. Minnesota moved Julius Randle and Naz Reid this offseason, and that opens a massive frontcourt opportunity behind Rudy Gobert. And Beringer only played spot minutes as a rookie, but the tools that he brings are obvious. He's long, athletic, explosive, and already flashes real defensive upside. And last season, 34 of his 70 made shots were dunks, which tells you the vertical pop that he has is legit. But I think the biggest issue is his discipline. He only started playing basketball a couple of years ago, so the instincts are still catching up to the athleticism that he brings. So in Vegas, I want to see rim protection without constant fouling. I also want to see better positioning on the defensive end, and him also being a factor on the offensive end. And for the New Orleans Pelicans, I'm going with Kobe Bufkin. This is one of the more interesting comeback stories that we have in the Summer League. Bufkin was the 15th pick in the 2023 NBA draft, but injuries completely disrupted his first 2 seasons in the NBA. He played only 27 games with Atlanta, then bounced through Brooklyn and the Lakers before rebuilding his value in the G League this past season. And with South Bay, he averaged 25 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists, earning all NBA G League second team honors, so the talent is still there, but I think his biggest swing skill is his shooting, because through 2.5 NBA seasons, he hit only 21% from 3, and so that's one thing I'm interested to see in Summer League, whether or not that's improved, and if it has, he could earn a another real chance in the league. Now for the New York Knicks, I'm going with Mohamed Diawara, who I was interested to see on the Summer League roster. The Knicks are coming off a championship and bringing back their core, so roles on the bench are going to be hard to win, and that makes Summer League big for Diawara in my opinion. He barely played in the playoffs, but New York clearly believes in him after signing him to a 4-year, $10 million deal, and at 6'9", he gives them size, straight line driving ability, and enough shooting to be interesting. He made 37% of his threes and showed flashes whenever he got extended minutes this past season, and with Mitchell Robinson now in Boston, there may be more front court minutes available, and I think Diawara could be that guy, but he has to prove that he could be a consistent contributor off their bench. Up next, it's the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I'm going with Aday Mara as my guy to watch. Oklahoma City already has Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein, but adding a 7'3" center gives this roster even more size and lineup flexibility. Mara was the 12th pick in this year's draft after breaking out at Michigan, and his debut already showed why OKC liked him so much. The passing that he has is rare for his size. He can hit cutters, find shooters, and see angles most 7-footers would never even attempt, but the concerns are already evident, and that's his pace and conditioning. At Michigan, he played fewer minutes than other lottery frontcourt pieces, and fatigue showed up at times, and we definitely saw that in the Salt Lake City Summer League from him. So in Vegas, I think the biggest key for him is showing that he can keep up with the game being faster, but also showing his ability to protect the rim and be a stopper on the defensive end. Next, we got the Orlando Magic, and for them, I'm going with Jace Richardson, but I also want to shout out Cam Reddish, who is making an appearance in the Summer League. But for me, Richardson has a lot to prove entering year 2. As a rookie, injuries around him opened the door for minutes, but he struggled to break through in a crowded Orlando backcourt. But I do think the skill is still there. He made 40% of his catch and shoot threes and 47% of his pull-up twos, which points to real scoring touch, and Orlando needs more perimeter juice, and Richardson can offer that as a combo guard with poise in the pick and roll. But I think the biggest questions around him are his defense, his size, and if he can hold up against bigger guards and create enough pressure at the rim, and that's exactly what I want to see from him in the Summer League this offseason. And then next, it's the Philadelphia 76ers, and I have to go with LeBaron Philon. Philon was one of my biggest steals in this year's draft, and then what Philadelphia did this offseason just makes it even more important. Philadelphia added Jaylen Brown and Anthony Simons, so Philon won't be forced into a huge role right away, but I do think he could be an important piece for a team contending for a title. Now in the backcourt, you already have Tyrese Maxey and VJ Edgecombe, so Philon's going to be behind them, but I still think he can be a scorer off the bench who can just go get a bucket. At Alabama, Philon averaged 22 points and 5 assists as a sophomore, while nearly hitting 50, 40, 80 shooting splits, and that efficiency is what makes him really exciting for me, and Vegas should give him more time on the ball and let him create for himself and others, and if the scoring translates like I think it will, Philadelphia is suddenly going to have another young guard who can create offense when their stars are sitting on the bench. And for the Phoenix Suns, I'm going with Kaman Malawach, but I also think Koa Pete is another guy I'll be watching closely. Now, Malawach barely played as a rookie, logging only 411 minutes in 46 appearances with the Suns, while almost every other top 11 pick from his class cleared 1,200 minutes, so this summer is huge for him. Phoenix struggled this past season protecting the rim, and that problem got exposed badly against Oklahoma City in the playoffs, and Malawach was an impressive rim protector to me at Duke, and at 7'1", he gives the Suns a real backline presence when he's ready, but that's a big win. The Mark Williams durability questions make this even more important to me though, and I don't think Malawach has to dominate Summer League, but he needs to show that he can defend, finish at the rim, rebound well, and just look like a dependable big out there. And then we got the Portland Trailblazers, and I have to go with Yang Hansen. Portland didn't make a pick in the 2026 NBA draft, so to me, the focus shifts right back to last year's 16th pick, which was one of the biggest surprises of that draft. Now, Hansen was a fan favorite in Las Vegas last summer, averaging 10.8 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists, and at 7'1" and 270 pounds, his combination of passing and fill are extremely rare, but the rookie season overall was rough. He played mostly garbage time minutes, shot 31% from the floor, and had more turnovers than made shots on the season, and that cannot continue if Portland wants him in a real role sooner rather than later. But this year in Vegas, this is about progress, and Yang Hansen needs to show better defensive awareness, quicker decision making, and cleaner finishing. And if he can do that, I think his summer league could be a success. Up next, we got the Sacramento Kings, and for the Kings, I have to go with Darius Acuff Jr. Although Maxime Reynaud also made a surprise appearance on their summer league roster, but for me, Acuff has already become one of the most electric players we've had in summer league, as he averaged 23.5 points at the California Classic and helped Sacramento go 3-0. So the confidence that he brings is not the question, but the biggest question I have from those first couple of games is his efficiency. He's shooting 33% from the field, under 30% from beyond the arc, and putting up around 24 shots per game, and that's a huge workload for a smaller guard. But Sacramento drafted him 7th overall because he showed he can score, create, and put pressure on defenses while in college. So the next step for me in Vegas is elevating his playmaking and efficiency, and if he can show he can run the offense, hit shots at an efficient clip, and create for others, he could be one of the best players that we have in the Las Vegas Summer League. And for the San Antonio Spurs, I have to go with Carter Bryant, but I also want to mention Jaden Quaintance because if he plays, he could be the bigger player to watch. But if not, we got Bryant, and he already has a different kind of experience than most players playing in the Summer League. He played rotation minutes during San Antonio's finals run this season, and now he gets a chance to lead the younger group in Vegas. The defense is already real, and we know that. Last summer, he averaged 1.7 blocks in 6 games in the Summer League, despite standing 6'6", and that athleticism translated into useful NBA minutes. But the biggest question in his game has to be on the offensive side. He shot just 28.5% from the field and 26% from 3 last summer. And with Victor Wembanyama, Dylan Harper, and Stephon Castle already in place in that San Antonio Spurs lineup, I think Bryant needs to prove that his shot is heading in the right direction if he wants to continue to get more and more minutes. And right behind Bryant for the Toronto Raptors, I'm going with Colin Murray-Boyles. Toronto found a real piece with him at pick 8 in 2025, and I'm honestly surprised he's playing in Summer League, but his activity, his strength, and versatility this past season helped the Raptors finish as a top 5 defense in the league, and he ranked 3rd in true shooting percentage among rookies who played at least 1,000 minutes this past season, and that's winning basketball. He also earned all-rookie second-team honors and played meaningful playoff minutes, with only Dylan Harper and VJ Edgecombe getting more postseason run among rookies, and because of that, Toronto may not need to overextend him in Las Vegas, so he could only play a couple of games, but I want to see what his chemistry looks like with Allen Graves, who is the Raptors' first-round pick from this year, and also I want to see whether Murray-Boyles shows more comfort on the offensive end of the floor. And next, we got the Utah Jazz, and I'm going with Darryn Peterson, and I know the Jazz also have Ace Bailey and Cody Williams who are playing in the Summer League, but so far, Peterson has looked every bit like the superstar he has been hyped up to be. Through his 2 games in Salt Lake City, he averaged 26.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 7 assists, while shooting 53% from the field and 44% from 3. And coming into the league, we knew Peterson was one of the best scorers in this draft class, but the playmaking he has shown has taken him to the next level in my eyes. And I know it's early, but it already feels like he could be the favorite to win the Rookie of the Year this upcoming season. But lastly, we have the Washington Wizards, and you know I have to go with the #1 overall pick in this year's draft, AJ Dybantsa, but they also have Trey Johnson and Will Riley playing this summer. But for me, Dybantsa enters Vegas with some real pressure, especially with how Peterson and Boozer already looked great in the Salt Lake City Summer League, but that is exactly what makes him a must-watch in Las Vegas. Washington took him first because he showed he can create off the dribble, score in volume, finish above the rim, rebound, and also get to the free throw line. And at BYU, he averaged 25.5 points per game, which was the best mark in the entire country and one of the highest one-and-done lottery scoring seasons of the last 25 years. The Wizards this past season ranked 29th in offensive efficiency, so he should get a huge green light right away from them. And I just want to see if he can absolutely take over for the Wizards in Las Vegas. But that wraps it up for this video. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought and who are your favorite players that you're excited to watch in this year's Summer League. Also, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.